Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and I have a special treat today. I know you guys have heard me talk about the documentary that I was a part of a while back and that we're working on getting that stuff out with Erotic Erosion. And today I have some good friends of mine, actor Ricky Schroder. Welcome, Ricky. Glad to have you, and producer Jo Haskin. So I was going to ask you guys just kind of introduce yourself. I can give a long diatribe of your stuff, but for those that don't know you, maybe we'll start with ladies first, Jo, and kind of tell us who you are, what you're about, and then we'll get into Real American Heroes Foundation and all that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Clint. Yeah, we're very excited to be here with you and you being the interviewer this time. And I've been producing for quite a while, 20 plus years, about 15 years with Ricky, helping him run his production company, and transitioned into now running Ricky founded Real American Heroes Foundation. And I've been running that organization full time for almost 3 years now. And I've done a lot of different things, producing reality television from Duck Dynasty, Treehouse Masters to a lot of HGTV,
Ancient Aliens. Don't forget Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Aliens, and about 100 plus hours of television and films. I met Ricky doing a film through a mutual friend of ours who was producing it, introduced us in 2011, a film that he wrote and starred with his family, basically, and it was called Our Wild Hearts. And that's where we met. And then we continued on working together all of these years. I did other projects in between stuff that Ricky had going on, but mostly with him, working with him. We did a show called Starting Strong with the U.S. Army that I worked on for 3 years. It was a huge project that each season took about a year to produce, 3 months to shoot, and about 9 months to prep and work with the Army. And that's really where my love of soldiers and veterans came from, was working on that show. I just gained a whole new perspective of what our soldiers go through on a daily basis. We did 20 or 36 episodes, I think, Ricky, 36 episodes of that show.
30-minute episodes, each is 30 minutes. And the concept was like Dirty Jobs, except you take a civilian into the Army and you show them an Army job and you let them experience it for a week. And then at the end of that week, they decide to enlist or not. It was called Starting Strong. And that exposure to the Army really opened up our eyes to the military, and great project. It was a fun project to work on. And those relationships from Starting Strong helped me get to Afghanistan one day in the future.
Yeah. So that just really changed Ricky actually changed the trajectory of my life and my producing life. I was doing a lot of independent films before I met him. My husband and I had a production company and we did 4 films together under our company. But then I just started, working in LA, and I'm from Northern California. Didn't have any contacts at all in Los Angeles. We left our corporate jobs. I don't know what what we were thinking. My husband's a screenwriter. So we left.
Talented. He's so talented too. We're going to talk about the scripts.
Yeah. So I left these cushy jobs with benefits to try to pursue our dream of making films and television, and struggled for quite some time. And Ricky really changed our life. Meeting him and working with him and the opportunities that he provided.
It changed my life too, Jo. I mean, Jo's a secret weapon, and it's true. It's like 15 years. Like when you find good people, you have to hold on to them as best you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jo, you've done some amazing work, and just personal testimony of getting to work with you guys, like such good care, such good friendship, such warmth, such professionalism. In my experience, it was awesome. So
thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you. Thank you for that background, Ricky. For lots of people listening, they know you from childhood actor on Silver Spoons. You've been in NYPD Blue. You've been in all kinds of things, and been around kind of the Hollywood scene, for a long time. So tell us kind of that background story, and then kind of where that's moved you into Real American Heroes Foundation.
Well, it's a long story.
Sure.
Guess we got some time.
Yeah, we're not in a hurry. The fun part about podcast, right, is we don't have to rush it.
I started modeling when I was like 4 years old in New York City. And my mom recently told me a couple years ago, one of the last things I've heard from her was that I had 200 jobs in 1 year.
Wow.
Between 5 and 6 years old. And so I would go from Staten Island, where we lived, into the city and do like a 4-hour photo shoot or commercial, and then go back. But I did that 200 times in 1 year. So it seems to me like that's a lot of work for a 5 to 6 year old.
Yeah.
So it seems like there was a program that I was part of. The last words my mom said to me was that I wasn't the only kid in the program too. And that's kind of the last words I heard from her. So I don't know exactly what this program was, but it was a lot of work. I was worked a lot as a kid, and lots. And so then it sort of transitioned into the movie The Champ, which my father's favorite film. He would tell me that it was his favorite film. And I guess funny enough, it's President Trump's one of his favorite films too, The Champ. And so then I found myself in the movie The Champ. I somehow got this movie when I was 7 years old. I was given this movie, and started spending a lot of time in California, and lived in a hotel for 7 years called the Beverly Hills Comstock from when I was 7 or 8 till about 14. Then we finally got a house in California, and was doing Silver Spoons between ages of 12 and 17. I did other movies after The Champ. Did a movie with William Holden, did a movie with Alec Guinness called Little Lord Fauntleroy, movie with William Holden, The Earthling, did a Disney movie. So I did a bunch of movies. And then when I was about 12, I guess my career started slowing down, and the movie business. And so my agents and the people around thought it was a good idea to do a TV show. So they developed Silver Spoons for me, and then did that from when I was 12 to 17. I'd leave my house or the hotel when we got a house, and then go to school from 9 to 12, work from lunch from 12 to 1, and work from 1 to 6, 1 to 7. And we would do that. We did that for 5 years. And then after Silver Spoons, I was tired of sitting inside. I loved being outside. So Lonesome Dove came around when I was 17.
That's right. That's right.
Silver Spoons. I turned 18 making Lonesome Dove, and I fell in love with the West and fell in love with the vistas in the West. I'll show you.
Yeah, please.
Where I moved, because I like the West.
It's a beautiful view.
That's Julie. Well, anyway, I moved out West when I was 20, out here to Colorado. And I've been out here. I had 3 kids out here. And then I thought my Hollywood days were over. I thought I escaped Hollywood, but then I got called back. And so went back and did NYPD Blue. I was 28, went back to the LA and worked for some more years. But then I found myself back in Colorado. Now I'm 55, and I moved back here 3 years ago, and trying to make sense of all of the past memories and the past experiences, and what they all mean, and what was it for, and am I achieving my mission and my goals?
Yeah. We talked when we hung out a bunch filming, that kind of how the Lord came into some of that. Can you tell some of that testimony of how you, looking back, saw God kind of working in that in your life, and how you kind of came to faith?
Well, I had nobody but Jesus and God at points in my life. There was just nobody. I don't speak with my parents. I went through a hard divorce and hard with those relationships, and that's all getting better with the kids and stuff. But there was times in my life where I felt pretty alone, especially younger.
I bet. I mean, child actors have such a weight that's put on them and an expectation to entertain and perform and beyond, and you kind of lose that playfulness and
Well, I
kid
was an
play.
asset. I wasn't an actor.
Right.
There's a difference.
Sure.
And so I was kind of purpose built, placed into Hollywood, and then reignited in November of 2020 when they came over with Hunter Biden's laptop to my house and all this voting fraud data. So back in November of 2020, this guy came to my house, and I'd met him one time before. His name's Conan. And in 2011, I met him. He came over to my house, and I had 5 miniature donkeys I was giving away from my farm in California. And he showed up with a horse trailer, and he took the donkeys in 2011. And then in 2020, he came back to my house with this Hunter Biden information and this voting irregularity data that showed millions of votes were changed in specific counties, and started talking to me about like MK Ultra and these programs. And I started having memories from childhood that never had before. And, it was quite confusing.
I bet.
As a kid, I would be taken to a tennis court on Saturdays, and I'd play tennis from 9 to 12 on Saturdays. And at some point, I'd be taken from the courts into a private classroom, and there was a man there with a tape recorder and headphones, and he and I would sit across from each other in this room. And it also happened at his house. It happened other places, and it was my dad's tennis partner. His name was John Talvey. He was a NYPD detective who passed away in 2019. I tried to find him, but I don't know what he was doing with us kids, because there was other kids in the program. It wasn't just me. It was all around tennis. It was at a place called St. Joseph's by the Sea in Staten Island. It's an old high school, Catholic school. And that's where the tennis courts were, and that's where the classrooms were. And so trying to make sense of, why I'm in this fight, why they brought me this information, why they bring me Hunter Biden's laptop, why did they bring me the voting fraud data, is a bit perplexing.
Yeah.
But there was a program, and I was part of it, where they were planting seeds in Hollywood, and then watering them, and then, I guess harvesting them in some way, reigniting them. And I remember, I don't think I'm supposed to remember that there was this program, but I do.
Right.
And it was validated by one other person that it also happened to. And so there's more to meets the eye, Clint. I hear it's confusing.
No, I mean, I remember us talking about some of this in my heart, just going out to you and the struggle of so many things. And online, there's a lot of information about child actors and rings and, Epstein Island and all these things that are coming out and that are, people want to know about, and that there's enough information now where not all of it is crazy and not all of it is some conspiracy. And, you with moving to kind of Real American Heroes Foundation, how did that stuff coming about, that stuff kind of coming out, looking back on your childhood and realizing, man, there was something going on in Hollywood and some manipulation and some systemic problems that I was affected by, that's political, that's socioeconomic, that's systematic. How did that kind of mold and shape you towards the Afghanistan documentary, towards Real American Heroes? Kind of how did that start to come about?
So I guess my mission was to help destroy Hollywood, as it seems like to me. And when Hollywood fell, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, they started making. I think they fell because LGBTQ issues became. If you didn't make to be eligible for the Best Picture category, you had to make an LGBTQ plus themed film, and you had to have storylines, and you had to have crew. This is not freedom. This is what the Nazis did. They took over the arts. They took over the radio stations. They took over. We were talking about offline Operation Paperclip, and and COVID. like I saw all this mass attack in 2020 on the nation and on the arts, and I couldn't feel good about working for Hollywood and making Hollywood money, and and supporting that anymore. And so I decided I want to make a nonprofit, and because the programming out of Hollywood is destructive, so much of it, and like the Pentagon, for example, still works with Hollywood. You know, we can send kids to war and have them die on foreign battlefields, and their stories now aren't eligible for the Best Picture category because they're not gay, or maybe they are gay, but it's not part of the story. It's not
Or
part of
or
it's not,
DEI, the DEI hires, that was a big thing
or
too.
DEI hires.
Yeah.
And so we're asking kids to go fight foreign wars, but their stories aren't eligible for the highest award in the land because they're not the right color, or they're not the right gender. And it infuriates me that the Pentagon is still working with Hollywood, and they haven't changed that. And so that's where Real American Heroes came from. Is we need a counter programming effort. And so the idea for Real American Heroes is to be an aggregator for our stories of real American heroes, people that make this nation great and fight for this country. And all the funds or proceeds from any productions that we make go back into the fund to produce more content. So we need our own PBS. We need our own public broadcasting. And so the vision is taking money away from Hollywood, putting it towards our own stories, and start reprogramming the nation. Because, as we were talking about earlier, when this television came to our homes, I was part of it. And I was part of that machine, and it tells you what to think. It tells you what's right. It tells you what's wrong. It designs these archetypes that these writers write in these writing rooms, and then us as viewers watch these characters on television, and we then emulate these people. And we have less individuals now in the world because we're all these archetypes of these characters on TV, when human beings are much more complex than that. And so, it's just trying to fight the counter programming. That was the mission I was put on as a child, was counter programming. And so this is just an extension of counter programming.
And we
Yeah.
really want to, highlight what not just only our soldiers and veterans, but also what our Gold Star families, we have a script that really highlights what Gold Star families go through, and also first responders,
Yeah, tell people what Gold Star families are that don't know.
So Gold Star families are somebody that a mother, father, wife, sister, brother that lost somebody in war.
Gotcha.
And also, first responders, with all the defunding the police, and that they're, have been looked down upon and not respected for so long. We're seeing where that's all going. And so we want to highlight,
Yeah, we just saw that this last week, right?
Yes, we did. And I have to say, I was so impressed with LAPD and how they handled that situation, and how much patience. I can't even imagine the amount of patience that they had to have when people are yelling and throwing stuff at them in their faces. How you keep your composure in a situation like that and try to diffuse the situation with, they were very, from what I saw, very peaceful. And I just think that takes something that
the Holy Spirit
a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
I would have been very upset and wanting to fight back if somebody was spitting on me and throwing bottles at me, and
throwing bricks at my car and destroying our vehicles.
Yes,
And
it'd be very, very difficult. So highlighting what these folks are doing every day to preserve the peace and keep us safe, and being available when we need them. I mean, knowing that you can call 911 if you live in a community that supports your police and fire departments. We have a very strong police force where I live, and it's very nice to know, and very calming and reassuring, that if I call 911, somebody's going to show up very, very quickly. I think we have 1,000 police officers per oh gosh, what is the number? It's a lot it's a lot. And they really don't put up with a whole lot. And so it's I cherish that in
Right.
my community.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I think, that led to the documentary that we're working on, in the Council on Pornography Reform. And so tell that story, kind of tell you did some of the military background. You guys create Real Heroes Foundation to push back against the narrative, the secular narrative that Hollywood is pushing, and the agendas that the stories it's telling. And again, I think the thing that I go is it's America. People have the right to make whatever they want. If there's a secular world or a different religious world that wants to produce film and wants to tell stories, great. But what are the stories that aren't being told? And let's do that as well. So I think that's huge. And so talk about how uh, Ricky, the Council on Pornography Reform, and you can start back with the camera, how we've talked about the camera kind of coming
Yeah.
into America. But yeah, let's talk about that, and we'll talk about the documentary Erotic Erosion.
Well, our goal is to get an on-off switch for adult content, so that at the cellular provider level or the home internet level, they can turn off adult content. If you pay the bill to AT&T and you call them up and say, turn off adult content to my account and my kids' accounts, it's off. So that was one of our biggest goals is pornography is a disease. It's a sickness. It's just, I was exposed to pornography way too young. And I think I was maybe 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's way too young.
Yeah,
And
that's the average in America right now. 9 to 11 years old is the child's first viewing of pornography. And I was looking at some new data this last 6 months, and it's, by 11, the average American child has viewed over 20 hours of adult content. If you consider half naked girls or naked girls on TikTok pornography, right? You've got 11 and 12-year-olds who are just flipping through this stuff. And what we could have seen, right, Ricky or Joe, in our childhood in a year, these kids are seeing in a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it needs to be corrected. We've gone down this perverted path. With the First Amendment, they say that it became from freedom of speech to freedom of expression, and the courts defined freedom of expression to include pornographic images. When in the Constitution, the freedom of speech had to do with political discourse.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue with your government and not be afraid to be put in jail.
Right.
And it didn't include pornography. English common law is how our colonies were established. And English common law was pretty conservative. You couldn't do certain things. You couldn't be indecent in the public streets. And we've fallen so far from our roots of English common law in the colonies to where we're at today, that there needs to be a course correction. We're losing the population and its morals and the values of the masses. We're going down a dark path. I was reading an article today on the best virtual reality porn sites.
Mm-hmm.
It was an article about 15 of them, and how VR porn is okay because it allows people to have their fantasies without acting them out, is the whole concept of the article. But that's 100% wrong. Is when people have these thoughts, these visions, these images in their minds, it's harmful. It's not just a fantasy. It's they carry that with them throughout their day, throughout their week, throughout the way they interface with other human beings. And so when the Constitution was written, there was no electricity, and so we have to adapt, and we think that putting pornography back in the XXX pipeline is the first step. It used to be in the XXX URL, and then they shut down the URL. It still exists, but there's actually only one porn site on it, and they've moved it all to the .com retail world.
Mm-hmm.
The church leaders of the day and others were so offended that there was a XXX URL that they actually effectively shut it down, which pushed it into the .com retail world.
Well, this
Which was
goes back. Yeah, that goes back to how we do so much with our culture with church. Sometimes is that we go, we don't want to talk about sex with kids because they're going to have it. We don't want to have this triple X thing because they're going to go to it,
Hmm.
instead of having a robust, theological and relational, hey, this is what this is. This is how you fight against it. Here's the truth. Here's what healthy sexuality is. Here's your body's good. God loves your body. God loves sexuality. But when you use it in a distorted way and the devil twists it, then it becomes super, super damaging. And so, yeah, it's like we rip it off the dot triple X because we just don't want kids to see it or adults to see it and go to it. And now it's hidden within the vacuum of .com.
Yeah. And so we think maybe just putting it back into like a red light district on the internet, we'll then be able to control it better. And that's our number one goal is this on off switch, and giving parents the choice. If you pay the bill, Americans love choice. Why can't we have the choice to have that Jesus bubble around our families? If we want to turn porn off, it should be easier. It shouldn't be so hard. It should be just a on off switch. So we're working with Custer County, Colorado. The commissioner there, Bill Kanda, he's retired Air Force colonel, intelligence officer, friend of ours. I was with his son in Afghanistan. They passed a resolution making it a crime for anybody under 18 years old in their little county of, I think it's 4,000 or 5,000 people, to provide pornography to anyone under 18 years old. Just like a dry county, you can't give alcohol in a dry county. This is not like a dry county, but it could. We think that there could be a county initiative where counties start passing ordinances relating to pornography on a smaller level, which will then sort of build momentum to make them develop the on-off switch. And so if we could get a county, we have a county initiative, we're trying to get other counties to come on board at the county level to force the tech companies to address this.
And we know that technology is possible. We're also working with a company that has tested it and has proved that technology exists, that we could make that happen at the provider level. So, our whole goal is really just to protect kids. This whole thing about, our documentary, Erotic Erosion, is an educational documentary to, hopefully teach parents and others the harmful effects of, we had a whole long interview about social media and pornography on the internet, and just educating people about the effects. We're not saying, adults can do whatever they want, but we're saying if you're 18 and under, trying to protect and put things in place, some safety nets in place for parents and our society to know what these effects are. It's just like going back to when we've, big tobacco and things like that. We check IDs for all of those things. So why not, if we know that this is harmful, why are we not protecting our kids?
Yeah. And that goes back to Ricky, some of your commentary on, who is not wanting to do that, right? Like who's in charge of going, hey, listen, let's treat pornography and the smartphone, I would say, and go farther and say the smartphone in general, social media, like the drug that it is. We already know that dopamine, we already know the addiction that it's causing. We already know since 2010, 200% more kids are self-harming and 176% more of them are killing themselves every day. That's a pandemic, that's insane, that someone, is going, okay, well, we know that when kids see these hypersexual violent images, that pornography, 87% of it's extreme violence towards men and women. It's not Hustler magazine. It's not nudity that's the problem. It's the graphic violence and abuse that's in pornography. If that's kids' initial introduction into sex, like you said, Ricky, it's not a fantasy we know that that fantasy doesn't just stay in their head, that they then eventually act that out with a girlfriend or a boyfriend. That becomes, the way they objectify people and see people as objects. And then as addiction specialists, we know that it escalates. It doesn't just stay contained in this one thing, that you have to have more pleasure and more extreme and more violence to be able to, get an erection or have an orgasm or, do what the sexual thing is that is going on. And so, yeah, Joe, it's like, who hears this and goes, we shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's wild to me if we go up the system, who's saying no? Who's pushing back on this? And I got to go to DC last year and go through, Judiciary Committee, congressmen, senators, and they all seem on board, but it just feels like, okay, then what are we doing? What's the slow? Why are we not doing anything immediately for our children?
Mm-hmm.
And no one should be arguing against this for children, right? We could all debate on morality of sexuality and porn for adults and consenting adults. I have a strong opinion about that based on even how that affects adults. But if we just take the active approach of for children, for minors, what are we doing? And it seems like, very little.
Mm-hmm.
8 out of 10 child abuse victims of sexual child abuse know they're abusers, Clint.
Yep, 92%.
And so it seems like Congress wants to deal with stranger danger, but it's really the home that's the danger, and the friends and the school and and so it seems like that's the true pornography is the fuel that fuels this abuse. And like you said, we're not doing enough. We should be ashamed as a people, as a group, of allowing it to get this far. And I can't think of a better fight to take on, because even if we lose, we expose our enemies. And that's what I like about the fight. And I knew going into this, it's a fight, but sometimes you just got to go move out and draw fire. And that's what an Army term, move out and draw fire. And so that's what I try to do, move out and draw fire.
It's good, man. Joe, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is the first time, Ricky, that you've said, about them focusing on stranger danger, but most of, the abuse or, things that are happening to children or people that and a light bulb just went off. It's like, well, that's because those kids are available. Those kids, if somebody is addicted to porn or they're wanting to act out on certain things or whatever, it's because those kids are in the house, they're in the neighborhood. I hadn't really put that together as like why that is,
Yeah. Well, I think, I talk about this in Building Better Bridges a little bit, is that, the number one reason why, you can keep your kids safe from, experience sexual trauma is that they know, the proper language for penis and vagina. They know body safety rules, and they know that they should tell if something happens. And the number one reason a perpetrator won't commit sexual abuse against your child is if they think they're going to get caught. And so those things together can reduce sexual abuse by over 90%, because, you have a guy who, this is just what the stats say, right? You have an American male who grows up in a home from 0 to 5 and is exposed to adult content in films and on movies, and then he goes from 5 to 9. No one tells him about his body. No one tells him about, puberty. No one tells him about sexuality. He's bombarded by media and news about different versions and different things. Somewhere around 11, he's been on the internet looking at pornography, possibly masturbating. One in 4 of these boys is sexually abused by the time they hit 18. And so it's like, by the time they even get to a developmental level of thinking sexually or erotically, all of that arousal and distortion has been so severe. Then this person goes on to go into high school, and they have sex with other people, and they act out these things that have happened in their childhood. Then they become an adult. And it's like, at that point, they're looking at porn, they're isolated, they're alone, and they're a babysitter, or they're a coach, or they are supervising someone, and now they have this very broken, distorted arousal template that's been built, and children are still erotic to them and still arousing to them, and sure, they morally might know that's wrong, but they've become so addicted and so damaged that that's something that they are capable of doing. And the cycle then just continues, right? They harm somebody and that same story goes on. And we have to prevent this. We have the ability to prevent child sexual abuse and sexual trauma with just educating adults, which is, I think, what the beauty of the film and the documentary is trying to do, is really getting to the root and going, here's how it starts, here's how it builds in our culture, and here's how to prevent it. Will you join the fight? You know?
Yeah. I would love if you could share, Clint. I still think about it, and I think it's so brilliant. When you were telling us about when you leave your boys with somebody other than a family member, what you let them know ahead of time, which I think is such a just simple thing, but it's such a way to keep your kids safe.
Yeah. So, I always talk about body safety rules. And so, my kids are a little older, even in the last couple of years. So we're continuing to have those conversations in an age appropriate way, right? So what I might say to my 7-year-old or when he was 3 is different than I'll say to my 9 or 12-year-old. But, I always say you're the boss of your body. No one touches you. Your private parts are private. No one sees them except for when you're washing, and the people who are keeping you will not be doing that, right? Somebody that's trustworthy, me, a doctor, and I'll be present. My kids are, 11 and a half and younger, so I don't expect them to be smart enough and to be healthy enough to protect themselves. That's my job to equip them. And then I tell them we do not keep secrets. That if anybody asks you to keep a secret or not tell your mommy and daddy don't keep secrets from each other. We don't keep secrets from you guys. Secrets are different than surprises. We have a lot of surprises. So we may not tell mommy we got her a gift, or we may not tell mommy that we're going to watch a movie tonight with her and surprise her with flowers. But I'm not going to say, hey, go get some Oreos, but don't tell your mom I let you get those. That's a secret. And if you keep that status in everything in life, then when it comes to sexuality, if someone comes up to them and says, hey, let me see, your wee-wee, or let me see your TT, or let me see your nunu. One, my kids are going to go, well, that's weird. I don't even know what that is because it's called a penis, right? Like they're going to immediately go, something about this is off. Something about this is different. And also, my dad's told me 5,000 times, we don't do that and we don't show people those things because they're private and God made them good and my body parts are good. But these are things that I don't need to look at on film and on papers. And, and so that's the other piece, is just helping them to have both, to have a robust view that nudity and their bodies are amazing and made by God, and there's nothing they should feel ashamed of. And also not making it taboo to talk about, so that when that perpetrator, if that was a kid who's exposed to something or an adult tried to attempt to do something, that there would be alarm bells ringing and they would know what to do and feel confident to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably 1 out of 1,000 dads, though.
Oh, for sure.
Or you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, what was the statistic, Clint? Was it 89% of parents don't, or 86, 89, that don't have any sort of protection around social media at this point?
Yeah, 87% of parents have no rules for devices.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've been saying a lot recently in my talks as I've traveled all over the country, it's like people will say, well, my kid doesn't have a smartphone. And I'll say, well, does he have an Amazon Fire or a Kindle, or a smart, iPad? Then they have a phone. Right. Just because you haven't handed your kid a phone in their hand, if they have a device that can get on the App Store and get on the internet and be on YouTube and Instagram, that's the problem. The problem is not them making phone calls, right? Like that's not what's harming children. What's harming children is their early exposure to hypersexual content. I mean, even the fitness world right now, right? It's insane to me just what what we would have been ashamed of posting. Like for a female or a male to take their clothes off, or wear barely any clothes, and go put their camera down in the middle of a gym and angle it to where they can see, towards their private parts, to squat and show people how to do that, to then go and edit that and post it on Instagram so other people can watch it, and you don't feel uncomfortable with it, is a wild space that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's just an over-sexualized, hypersexualized culture, and it's come a lot from the electronics there. And I still remember the first pornographic video I saw.
Yeah.
At 9 years old. I'll never forget. It's that powerful. The
Same,
memory.
man. Same. I mean, most of the addicts I work with will say the same thing. They'll say, oh, I remember where I was at. I remember the sights and sounds, and I remember the exact memory of that thing. Because we're not supposed to see that as children. Not because sex is bad, not because sex is dirty, thousands of years, people had sex in caves, but they didn't do it in front of their kids in a violent, erotic way, right? Those
Yeah,
things were,
the camera came, and
Mhm.
ever since the camera was invented, you could distribute it. Before the camera, you had to engage in it or you had to witness it.
yep.
Then the camera came and you could capture a still picture and you could share it. And that ever since then, it's been a downhill slide
Yeah.
with pornography.
Which
Uh,
isn't that long. We act like it was 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a very recent modern, thing. If you look at the sex timeline, there were always cave drawings, right? Like there was literally pornography that we found from like cave drawings of people having sex. Like people have been masturbating and looking at cave drawings forever. But you see increasingly, like you said, all the way up to the camera, there's very little. And then from the camera to like 1980s, and you had, pornography shops where at least you had to go in, right? You had to like pull up to the store, get out of your car, walk in there and buy, whatever inappropriately and extremely crazy titled, VHS there was. You'd get it, you'd hide, you go in your car, you go home. And then from the dawn of the internet on, man, I mean, just the list of things that we can do and be exposed to. And again, I know all three of us have harped on this enough. We can take an adult argument about that. But the particular way in which kids are being exposed to these things and the way that's influencing our entire society. So take the fitness thing. Sure, you want to film your butt and do squats and put it on Instagram and let other adults see it. I don't want to tell you can't do that from an American standpoint, but I don't want my 12-year-old looking at that, my 12-year-old daughter watching that and thinking that's the ideal body, and listening to you tell her that you have to eat meat and count your macros, and that you have to have these abs and you have to have these fake breasts and you have to have these types of pants to wear. Because guess what they do? They emulate that. They stop eating. They start saying they're fat. They start looking into those things, and then they develop an eating disorder. And we're seeing these things happen at alarming rates,
Mhm.
and they can't ever achieve it. And so then they start self-harming or they're suicidal. And that's the problem with this hypersexualized stuff.
It's a lot.
It is.
It's a
It
lot.
is, but that's why we're doing the documentary, right? I mean, tell
well,
tell
it's hard
everybody
to,
more kind of who's in that and what it's about, and
yeah, but HBO will never air this or Netflix because they're selling that. You know what I mean? They're just not, trying to make an anti-porn documentary and get it out in Hollywood. It's, but anyways,
yeah,
we're
well, we need
persevering.
some billionaire, Christian, to come alongside us and help us, get this thing off the ground if they believe in this. I think of the pastors and the speakers and the people who have millions and millions of dollars in followers who I hope would listen to this podcast, who would email you or me or Joe and say, hey, we want to make this happen. We want to get this out there. I'd hope our political friends would be able to step in and say, let's give some funding to this, because it's not, we're not, I say this all the time. This isn't Clint's opinion. This isn't, Ricky's opinion or Joe's opinion. This is the secular world's research. This is the statistics and the research from the, American Psychological Association and the APA and the pediatrics and the WOW and CDC, and all these places are we're pulling these stats from these places. It's not like some pastor is preaching
Yeah.
from the pulpit and giving this research and saying sex is bad and you guys are sinful. Although we might agree with some of that, and
Yep.
and maybe not the way it's communicated, but we would agree with the philosophy. The things we're talking about are just hard, cold facts.
It's an epidemic.
Yeah, and
It is.
yet we need help. Like this, so
We do.
I'm with you, man. That's why I was so excited about doing this podcast, was because you guys have the reach and we need the help.
Well, I want TBN to air it, and so hopefully they'll hear this and get back to me. I tried to get a hold of the president of the network, and I haven't gotten a call back. But this is the kind of stuff that we need help. We need to pull together, and
We've
we
made
got to
really
change
good
this. We got to
progress.
change the culture. We're losing it, Clint.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We got to change the perversion from the culture. We got to remove it from the culture.
Yeah, we are desensitized, so we have to sensitize ourselves. We've got to get back to people with hearts that see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, and people worthy of love and treatment, and sexuality being a gift of God that is a form of worship instead of a form of consumption.
Yeah.
Joe,
Sorry,
you were gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we've done 11 interviews so far. I mean, we're clearly on the path, and we've made some really good headway on the documentary where we thought we would be, but we do need help, and it doesn't have to be a billionaire. It could be a lot of people coming
Sure.
together
Yeah, I was
and
joking.
donating a small amount too. That all adds up very quickly, as well. But we figured we have about 8 more filming days, and then we have our post-production left to do. But we have some incredible interviewees that have put their hearts and souls into this too. So we want their stories to be told. We want people to hear our interview with you. And we interviewed Dr. Daniel Amen of the Amen Clinics, and he talks a lot about what you were saying about childhood development. And he also we spent a lot of time with uh, a sex worker who he scanned her brain for trauma and talked a lot about the things that she had been through as a sex worker, and all the trauma that she experienced and how that affected her brain. He's done over 250,000 brain scans,
Mm-hmm.
and he educated us about how pornography and what the brain looks like from a sex addicted brain to a cocaine brain, somebody that's addicted to cocaine, and the sex addicted brain is way worse in shape than the cocaine brain.
Mm-hmm.
So we, got a chance to sit down with him, and we also talked with a police officer who specialized in sex trafficking, how pornography can, lead to that, which we talked about a little bit earlier, all the different things it could lead to.
a
And
pastor that was put in prison for FBI came to his church and arrested him for pornography. That was one of our subject. I mean,
talking with underage girls on the internet and got caught at the church. They arrested
Yeah,
that.
which is a phenomenon that we see. It's sadly every week, and just this last week, a famous musician was allegedly they're taking him off K Love and taking their bands off K Love, and I won't mention their name. You guys know who I'm talking about, but these things are happening every week, and it's because of this exposure at an early age. It's not. I mean, people are sinful, right? We all fall short of the glory of God, and we're all capable of doing some heinous things. But the real issue is that children, right, before they're ready, before they're discipled, before they're healthy, are being so overly exposed and traumatized to these things that then their choices is super difficult, right? It's super uh, taken from them on some level.
Mhm.
lack of self-control is established
Right.
at a young age.
What do you have anybody else, on the way that you guys are kind of, going towards? I know we had talked about trying to get Pamela Anderson on there. Have we had any connections with her?
No, we
No
haven't.
response.
Not yet.
Okay.
We
It's
went through a personal relationship, I know, to Pam, and I guess it didn't work.
yeah, I got you.
Pam was so overly sexualized, and now has really changed her image, completely now. And, it's, I cheering her on, because I think,
Absolutely.
she's really stepping out and living her best life and trying to, counter a lot of things maybe that happened to her, in the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And, Showgirls was kind of her, she was still sexualized in that film, but it talks, the film is about how she was aging out of the industry and how that was affecting her. And, the same thing has kind of happened to her in Hollywood. And so it's, life into or art into, what is that? Art imitating life by
Yeah.
vice versa. Um, but she's getting recognized now, or she's being talked about now because she's not wearing makeup,
Right.
and how she was so made up in, all of those years of when she was on
Absolutely. Well, maybe
Baywatch.
she'll hear it. I'll tag her to the podcast. Maybe she'll hear it and come and help us out, because I think it would be a beautiful story for her to be able to get on and talk about that and really help explain, because these conversations are uncomfortable. People feel really uncomfortable with them, but if we don't talk about the details and we don't get down to the root causes, then we're going to just perpetuate this stuff onto the next generation. Ricky, you were talking about AI pornography, and it's wild to me. Even since we did the filming, since I came out and filmed with you guys, what was around then with ChatGPT didn't exist. I mean, even since we've filmed, what is going on every 6 months with AI pornography is insane. Just recently, they dropped a new update, and you can produce I think it's about a 9-second to 12-second video using AI. And so now there's already, you just type in the chat the prescription of what you want to see, and it can create whatever you want it to create. Now, when I came and shot the documentary, it was, putting children's faces, right? They had the face swap app, and that was kind of the big thing where we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. People can take your child's face and put it on pornography, and that's awful. And now, you literally can just make whatever you want to, right?
And that's just been a little over a year.
If that, yeah. And really, in the last 3 months, has it switched to video? I mean, it was just still images, high resolution, very realistic pornography, still images. And now it's like you can pretty much make anybody that you want, celebrities. I saw a post before we were talking about it. I was reading an article, and it was a fake AI image of Ashton Kutcher, and he was coming out of a tunnel with these people as if he was coming from a trafficking ring, and it was this kind of conspiracy conversation about him. But it was AI, they just threw him in there, and that's the scary part about where we're at now is, we really need the police officers to be able to go in and look at the phone and look at the video and go, oh, hey, this was edited. This was not real. And thank God we can still do that. Thank God there's still a URL and a connection. And, I don't know how all that works, but there's a way to make sure it's viable or AI. But for kids and for parents that are listening to this, man, giving your kid access to a phone and app stores and ChatGPT and allowing them to create and explore sexually now, literally with whatever you want to create, we don't even know what problems that's going to cause in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think back when because we did have an AI cyber, expert that we interviewed. And, he was even saying then tomorrow, this will all be different. So we'll probably have to update that interview for sure. But the biggest thing we were talking about back then was, creating child pornography, and how do you determine what that actually is? Because if you're using AI images from the internet of, say, a young person, what is a young person in AI's world? So, and then how do you police that? Like you're saying, it's still going to affect the person watching it. They may act out on some of that behavior because of it, but how do you prosecute something that is not real?
Yeah, I mean that brings up there's the MAPS, the minor attracted people, kind of movement, and they have their own flag and they have their own association and website, and it's it's people who say they were born attracted to children, and they have this arousal template that is the same as homosexuality, is the same as any of those things. And so there's in the sex addiction world and in the world that I'm trained in the secular modality, there's this kind of conversation of how do we treat that, and is that treatable, and is that right or wrong, and we don't want to shame people, and I just think we're getting down a rabbit hole that is pretty insane if we take morality out of it. And again, with what we're trying to have this conversation about, to get this awareness out to people, to be able to get some streaming platforms, to get this in the hands of more Americans so they can be aware, it gives them informed choice. Like you said, Ricky, people love choice.
Yeah.
Right? People want to be, but they're not informed. They don't even know, the dangers that are out there. And we're so lulled because we want to consume, escape from our lives to numb out on stuff. And we're one click away from the worst part of humanity.
Mm.
Do you think, Clint, that the homosexual kind of agenda is part of the pornography? I mean, if you look at, normal males, we're not supposed to watch each other have sex. It was just not ever a public event from my understanding of human history. there was obviously orgies throughout history and decadence, but majority of sex is one-on-one. It's between a man and woman. Now, when you put it on video and you're a young person watching people have sex on video, you're watching me as a man, I'm watching another man have sex with a woman, but I'm still watching the man, and I think, you get opinions about, well, is this man attractive? Is this man not attractive? And it's a confusing thing for a young mind or boy to, watch other people have sex.
Yeah,
And
I think we can't say that it doesn't influence anything, right? I don't know if we have the science and the research to show that it does particularly influence something, but I mean, we see the consequences of pornography. We see the consequences. That's why we have laws, right? Like that's why we don't let adults have sex with kids, is because it's illegal and damaging and traumatic. Like we know that happens. So we can assume and we can research that children watching other people have sex changes what we call an arousal template. We know that if a child at 3 or 4 is sexually abused by an adult or another child, that it can change the ways in which that child is turned on and what they are aroused by and their pursuit of orgasm and sexual development. We know that scientifically, right? That's not a moral judgment. That's just what it is. So I think what we have to do is take a case by case basis, and this is why I think relationships are key, and this is why I think Christianity and discipleship and a loving community is key, is that we then have to take each person and sit them down and say, tell me your story. What did you see? What were you exposed to? How could that and how did that affect, your sexual identity, your gender identity, your identity in Christ, your identity in your religion? Let's talk about those things. And why would we be talking about those things? Well, because the person would be coming forward saying, I'm hurting, I'm in pain, I don't like the way my life is going, right? If somebody's an adult and they're like, my life's great, and all their friends are saying their life is great, and there's no damage, and there's no addiction, and there's no depression or anxiety, well, obviously they're not sitting in a chair trying to figure things out. I'm wanting to talk to the people who are hurting. The people who are confused, the people who are killing themselves and harming themselves and changing themselves because they think their identity is going to be found in those things. They come into my office and I go, tell me your story, right? I don't want to make a broad sweeping claim about all homosexuals or all transgenders or all Republicans or Democrats. I want us to have the information and be equipped with it. So in relationship, when people are in pain, we can give them hope. Right? That their identity is not in the porn they've seen or the abuse that happened to them or in their sexual preferences or in their gender, but their hope is in who Christ says they are, that they're loved and valued and worthy because he has made them so through his death and his life and his resurrection. And that is the story that, I think in some ways we're both trying to tell with Real American Heroes, is that, let's put those stories, those archetypes on when there's war, when there's conflict, when there's anger and racism and sexism. How do we love one another and have good boundaries and push people, to the proper identity and not get lost in the chaos?
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Hey, well, yeah, no, I thank you guys. I mean, I get excited about it. I mean, again, I'm just so thrilled to have you guys on here and to get to talk about this stuff. You talked a little bit about your new podcast that's coming out, so let's kind of talk about that for a second.
Go ahead, Joe. Real American Voices.
Real American Voices. Yeah, we're just in the beginning.
Just early stages.
Yeah. Yep, early stages, but we already have a long list of guests. We hope you'll join us one day on ours.
Love to.
And, we are just wanting to continue our mission of telling these American stories, American people, American heroes, everyday heroes. Just there's so many people out there that you were talking about. Tell us your story. I mean, it's really that simple. Everybody has a story, but we just really want to highlight those that have made an impact on our country.
Patriot Plates kind of created this idea, and they look at stories from war fighters of the past, and they share those stories. It's on our streaming service, Patriot Plates.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two seasons, and the concept of the show, where we acquired the licensing of 2 seasons, and we're working on a 3rd season with one of our producers, David Van Wee, he created it with his daughter, this show. And the concept is they look for plates, license plates that
Military plates.
are military plates, veteran plates, and they track them down. They run, they follow them into a parking lot, and ask
Gotta
them.
be careful with that with veterans.
I know, right? And ask them if they're interested in telling their story, and then they schedule a time to sit down and they tell their war story, their experience of being in the military, and there's some amazing stories out there, and we just want to we really want to continue that.
Yeah, I'd love to get on there and talk about the Superdome and Hurricane Katrina. That'd be a great story to tell.
Yes, that would. And so yeah, we're building our guest list over, right now, and hopefully within the next month or so we'll have our first episodes up.
That's awesome. Well, I'm proud of you guys.
Thanks. Like keep an eye out on our socials. We'll be announcing it there when the first episode drops.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to put, all the ats and all the things for them to follow. Any closing thoughts or comments you guys got?
I thought I could read one of the Psalms.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Psalm 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish.
Thank you, Ricky. That's good, man. Yeah, makes me think of that other, scripture in Matthew where Jesus says, narrow is the gate and few find it, and wide is the gate to destruction, and many are walking on it. And I just want our friends and our family and people listening to this being on the narrow path. And that means pushing back against culture, means pushing back against our flesh and the devil and the world, and pushing into Christ. And so, man, I appreciate you reading that. It's
Jesus
so good.
Saved me, Clint, and I want him to save other people too, because literally it took him to save me. I couldn't save myself. It took Jesus, and so thank you, Jesus.
Amen. Amen. Joe, you got anything?
No, I don't think so.
Well, good. Well, it's so good to see you guys' faces. We'll stay in chat. We'll stay in chat after I cut off. But guys, thank you all so much for listening. Please, please, please go check out Real American Heroes Foundation and the Council on Pornography Reform. Please give your money, give your resources. If you have support or connections to people who also need to hear this podcast and want to see the documentary, there's some clips on my social media and on their social media. Help us finish it. Help us get it out to a network. TBN, if you're listening to this, I know some friends who just started a show on TBN. I'm going to reach out to her. We would love to get this stuff out so that we can help America's children and the world's children. India is one of the most bombarded countries right now where everybody is in poverty, but everybody has a smartphone, and the sex addiction and the trafficking is at an all-time high. So we want to help the world with these things. So thank you for your effort, Ricky and Joe, and your sacrifice. God bless you guys and have a good week.
All right. Bye. Thank you.